Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Business Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Stannis. Marketing is essential to any good business. It helps you reach and build relationships with your target audience and ultimately turns those relationships into engaged customers. But marketing can be overwhelming for some, with websites, brochures, emails, social media platforms, content creation, goals, strategies, the list goes on. It's one thing to market your business without any direction, but it's another to market your business with a clear plan. The results are quite different. In today's episode, we'll discuss the importance of having a marketing strategy and how it should revolve around understanding your target audience to help you craft the right message and engage with your customers the most effectively. But first, let's meet today's guest, Sergio DeCesare. Sergio is a certified business coach, certified profit and growth expert, certified company value builder and exit strategist, and a #1 best-selling author on Amazon for business leaderships and ethics. He owns Max Business Profits coaching and consulting firm and helps businesses right here in Southwest Florida. Sergio, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charles. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive in. I think this is a topic that I think people in the back of their mind know it's important. They just don't really give it the attention it deserves. And I'm sure, we'll talk in depth greatly about exactly what I just said. But I really wanted to start today's episode with an interesting statistic that I found online that kind of ties everything together. According to CoSchedule's trend report on marketing strategy in 2022, businesses that have an organized marketing strategy are 674% more likely to report success. So really, what kind of jumps out to you with that number? Because that's a big number.
It is a big number. And in essence, what we're saying is the people with a plan are getting 6 to 7 times more business revenue, what have you. And it's not that we're going to look at how much more they're getting. What we need to look at is how much less the people without a plan are getting.
Great points. Yeah, so, let's kind of start, I guess, from the very beginning there. Marketing strategy, that's kind of all what we're talking about. Give us the 101, if you will, of someone who outside marketing, maybe they're just starting their business, marketing's not their forte, and they hear the word marketing strategy. Where do you start with that?
Well, I think what we have to do first is differentiate between the term strategy and tactics. There's a lot of talk about, my marketing strategy is Facebook or whatever. Well, no, that's a tactic. Okay, a strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. All right, tactics without strategy is the noise before the defeat, and strategy is the why, and that's Sun Tzu. All right, so marketing plans, marketing strategies are the whys of what you do. They are the overall plan. So the overall plan is, okay, we do this because blank, 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 but how do we achieve what we want to accomplish here, right?
Yeah.
Strategy is we want more leads, okay? Do we get those off of Facebook? Well, Facebook is a tactic, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference. Everybody interchanges those, and they don't really understand what they're saying when they say that.
Yeah, and I think, especially when we talk about tactics, I think that's where people get the most excited, right? And they're like really amped up and they're really energized and they want to dive in there first. But, you had said it, you said it well when you said, you have to start with your strategy because you can't implement your tactics if you don't know the direction that you're going, right? We can't steer the ship maybe to Facebook if we don't know what our actual end goal is.
Correct.
So when we talk about tactics, you're talking about, social media channels or platforms, email marketing,
direct marketing, direct mail marketing, that's a tactic.
Blogs, podcasts like we're doing right now, all this stuff is tactical. So...
And that's where the fun is, right? That's where people have their fun.
Yeah, and, I think, like I said, that's really where people love to jump in. But correct me if I'm wrong, if people just jump in right away, that's where they're most inclined to not succeed, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. So most organizations only focus on the what they do and how they do it, okay? But the other piece is the why they do it, and that goes back to the strategy. So if you want to increase your leads, right, how do we do that? What's the point of doing all this if that's not what we're going to do, right? We have to get business. And this goes all the way back. I mean, there's so many aspects to this, I don't even know where to begin. So if you don't know who your perfect customer is, you have to know that, because you may have more than one type of customer that's a good customer for you. That message to them may be different. right? It could be a different demographic. Could be a different psychographic.
Yeah,
right?
and my favorite question, I think we had talked about this earlier, was, who's your target audience? And you hear back, everyone.
Right. That's like one of my pet peeves when I go to these networking events and people stand up, like particularly mortgage brokers like this. Well, I'm looking, my favorite customer or my perfect customer is anybody who needs a mortgage. Well, no, that's not really right, because maybe it's first-time home buyers. Maybe it's a refi. Maybe it's empty nesters. There are different levels even within that business. It's not just everybody who needs a mortgage.
Yeah, so how specific should you get when you're looking at your target customer?
I think you get very, very specific, because every target customer, especially if you have more than one, and a lot of businesses do have more than one, okay, that message is crafted particularly for that type of customer. But if you haven't done the exercise of saying, okay, who's my perfect avatar, and that's the word we use for saying who's your perfect customer, you really need to do that first and foremost.
So someone's looking to figure out their avatars, where should they start?
Well, if you've been in business more than 15 minutes, you probably have some people that you've already worked with. It might be as simple as saying, well, I like working with this group of people, and I don't like working with this group of people. Or, if you can go back to your history and say, well, I seem to have the most success with this type of person. Now, everybody uses demographics. I kind of like to take it a little bit further and use psychographics. And what psychographics are really is, we have the age, we have the gender, we have that kind of stuff that everybody talks about. But we're not talking about, okay, so my perfect customer maybe drives a Lexus, maybe drives a luxury European sports car. Where do they hang out online? Okay, maybe they hang out on sailboat websites. What do they look like? How do they dress? What typically, those are the psychographics. Those are the psychological behaviors that tell me exactly who my perfect customer are, down to a very fine point.
So we basically look at our data, go through our customers, maybe do an analysis of our existing customer base, look at our leads that are coming in, classify them, say, hey, I've got maybe 3 different avatars, A, B, and C. I'm going to change the message for each one. And then once I have a message for each one, that's when then I can say, okay, now I'm going to start to implement different tactics for each avatar in your case, in your example.
Correct, because maybe the people for avatar 1 can be found on LinkedIn, whereas avatar 2 can't be found anywhere online, right? There's a difference there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. So I wanted to kind of tie in, we had talked about strategy, we had talked about tactics, we're now talking about customer avatar. I really wanted to tie in this thought of what's a negative persona buyer, or in your case, what's a negative customer avatar?
That's great, and I'm actually happy you brought that up, because a lot of people don't give it that much thought. But just in the same fashion, you can go back and look at all the customers you really enjoyed working with. There's also a couple that probably stand out in your mind that you will never want to work with again.
Yep.
And, in my particular industry, what I find as a negative buying persona might be somebody in the retail industry. It's hard for me to work with business owners in a real retail industry, because they are very much focused on price. And, if it's a race to the bottom, someone else is always going to beat you there. So for me, that's a negative avatar. I don't want to work with them because they're very focused on discounting and pricing. And I can tell you that's not how you build a business.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's very important to know that, so when these leads are coming in, you know where to spend your time wisely, correct?
Absolutely. That's pre-qualifying the person before you actually maybe give them the pitch or whatever. If if you're selling something and these people don't have the budget for what you're selling, is it really, you can either cross-sell, downsell, upsell, whatever, if that's within your model. But otherwise, why spend a whole lot of time going through the motions with somebody who's not actually a qualified buyer?
Do you have a story that sticks out in your mind where you've come across a business who, I guess, maybe is focusing too much time on their negative persona or their negative avatar, which is then, of course, obviously translating into them not being successful?
Really, what I tend to find with my clients initially in the beginning, they tend to accept anybody who's waving a checkbook or a dollar bill or whatever. And that's, I understand that. We all have to eat. But I think even if they know maybe this is not the person they should be working with, they tend to still want to do business with them. And, that's a natural human behavior. But once my clients realize, no, I'm not going through that, because in the end, and look, it's even in my own business. A lot of times when I've given major discounts to clients, those tend to be the ones that cost me the most time, grief, energy. It always works out that way.
Yeah, we've all been there for sure.
A lot of people probably feel the same way about.
How do you manage the stress of maintaining all of these different tactics, especially when we talk about making sure you have a different execution for each run, right? Especially when we talk about, our different customer avatars.
Well, what eliminates stress in any business is processes. If you don't have the processes, if you're the person who's got to post things every day, or you're the person who's got to execute A to Z to get that job done, you're just going to be a lot of stress. You got to have the processes in place.
So, would you say for let's say I have someone who, maybe it isn't all about the process. Maybe we're more about focusing on the people or the product, right? I don't know if you've ever heard about the 3 Ps.
Oh, yes.
That might be a big thing.
Marcus Lemonis.
Yeah.
And it's funny you brought that up, and I was really hoping you would bring that up, because Marcus talks about the 3 Ps, people, product, and processes. I actually have 7 that I've been working with over the last 7 years. Would you like to hear them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, yes, we have people, processes, and product. We have pricing. I find a lot of my clientele do not understand pricing, why they charge what they charge. The biggest answer I get for that is, well, this guy over here is charging X amount of dollars. I'm going to charge X amount of dollars minus 10%, so I'm going to get his clientele. No, doesn't work that way. That's a race to the bottom, and nobody wins on that. So pricing principles is another one. If you have no principles in business, if people can't know, like, and trust you, how are you going to do business? Can't do it. Planning, promotion, that's another one. The P's of promotion is, okay, you have the people, the processes, and the product. Now, how are you going to promote it? Which is exactly what we're talking about right now today.
Yeah.
So those are the 7: planning, promotion, principles, pricing, product, processes, and people.
Love it. So let's circle back a little bit and let's talk more about, measuring our success, right? Because we've got our strategies, we talked about tactics. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty, and in your opinion, what are some indicators, KPIs, if you will, right? Let's try to use terms that people might be familiar with.
Sure.
That you would recommend people use to, I guess, measure the success, not only of their tactics, right, but their overall strategy as well. How does that kind of all tie together?
To me, it's a very simple answer. Is the phone ringing? If it's not, then obviously the strategy is not going to change. You still need leads, right? That's the strategy, to bring more leads in. But if the phone's not ringing and you're on Facebook, which to me, Facebook is vastly overrated. Now, I think for certain businesses there is an opportunity there. But in my opinion, people go to Facebook for entertainment, not to solve a problem. And if you're in business, believe it or not, whatever business you're in, you're a problem solver. Mm-hmm. That's it.
At least we hope so, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You solve a very specific problem for a very specific clientele. So going back to the original question, which was KPIs. So if the phone's not ringing, number one, something's not working. It's either the message, maybe it's the venue where you're presenting that message. Okay, maybe the phone is ringing, but you're not closing deals. I get a lot of that. I get all these calls, but I can't close these people. Well, let's talk about the conversation you're having when they pick up the phone. If, people are calling you, and I have a great story about this. I have a home inspector who I work with now for the last year, which I've been able to help him double his annual revenue in that time frame. One of the first things we worked on was, okay, the phone is ringing, you pick up the phone, people say, well, how much for a home inspection? And his answer would he would actually tell them what the price was. Now, I'm not saying being deceptive, but that's not really the question here. The question is, what is the customer's appetite for risk? Now, if they say, well, I don't care, I just need the inspection done, well, maybe I'm not the guy for you because I'm very, very thorough.
Right.
So it's a conversation thing. But going back to the KPIs, once I was able to help him establish that conversational pattern, his KPIs went up too, because now, the calls were coming in, but now he's closing those calls. he's getting those jobs.
Yeah, so really looking at, with a fine-tooth comb of, where the actual problems are occurring, figuring out, hey, going through the 7 Ps that we talked about, what's missing, right?
Right. Absolutely. And so right now what we're talking about, well, part of that conversation was pricing. How's this pricing in line with everybody else's? I don't care if you're in the top 10 or 15% of that price range. That's exactly where I want my clients to be. I don't want my clients to be in the middle. I want them to be at the top 10%. But you have to show value for that. So that conversation was about value.
Not pricing.
Not pricing.
Yeah.
So when the value is seen, $50 here, $50 there, who cares? I'm getting value for my money. I know what I'm getting with this guy. But, people come to me and they go, well, I don't understand. I run these things on Facebook. I got 150 likes on this, 400 likes on that. Okay, tell me how that's monetizing.
Right.
Tell me if the phone's ringing from that. And generally speaking, they're like, I don't know. Well, you're asking them when they call where they heard.
So they're missing that strategy piece.
Well, it's actually a part of the tactic. The strategy is to make the phone ring, right? But the tactic is going on Facebook to see if that...
Implementing the tactic correctly.
But if people are calling and you're not asking them how they heard about you, you're missing a big part of the tracking part.
Yeah.
But, like I said, I have people who tell me they have all these likes, but they can't monetize it. Well, guess what?
So if you could give one bit of advice to someone who's looking to start their marketing strategy, get into all the tactics, what's one of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing, going off the example that we just had, for example, that if you could tell them now would solve them so much, or would ease their pain, so much?
It all starts with understanding who your customer is and who your customer's not. Okay? Then you craft the message. Then you have to decide where that message is going to be displayed. And there's a whole train of things that goes on with this from start to finish, from the lead generation all the way to closing the deal, closing the sale, delivering the product. And that's not where it ends. I mean, I had a conversation with a client the other day. I said, your job does not end when they pay you for the job done. You still have to follow up with them, make sure they're happy. If they're happy, get the review, get the testimonial. There's more to it. There's a whole process, and all this is wrapped up into the marketing.
Would you say that's kind of where the journey begins, in a sense? Or?
The journey begins with understanding who your customer is, right? Why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, we're doing this, so we're going to approach these type of people. Now, do they have money? People talk about millennials and marketing to millennials. Well, that's great, but you know what? The money in this economy in this day and age is not held by the millennials. It's held by the Gen Xers and the boomers. So that's who I would think you want to, if you're a homeowner and you're a boomer, boom, there's money there, right? If you're a service company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's some advice that you would give to someone looking to tap into a new buyer persona or start a new target audience?
How to start a new target audience, or what?
So let's go back to the home inspector, for example. Let's say he really, let's say he's coming from a different area, right? And maybe his target audience is completely different than the vast majority of the target audience down here, and he's just trying to tap into a new market. What's that process look like? Is there a lot more thought process that needs to be involved in something like that, or?
Well, that's kind of it's an interesting question, because if he's going for a different market than the typical home inspector's going for, I think we would need to know exactly what that product is and if he's done his research. And I know, one thing people don't do is they don't research their market. They just think they have a great idea and they just want to go ahead and throw it out there. Well, a great idea to you may not be a great idea to me. People do not do their market research down here. They just throw it against the wall and see what sticks.
So in your mind, how can someone effectively do their market read? Like what are some tips, maybe some things that you've seen that have been successful?
Well, a lot of data can be found online. But, if you're in an area like this area, if I move down here, the first thing I'm going to want to talk to are people in my industry to see how they're doing and get an idea of what they feel is going on in the market. I talk to different people across different industries all the time. And it's funny, when somebody has their processes down, their product down, their delivery of that value proposition, if you will, they tend to do way better than those who are kind of winging it.
Well, that goes back to the stat we talked about, right?
Right.
At the very beginning.
Right.
Was it 7 times more?
7 times more.
Yeah.
7 times more. But, you got to understand your market. You got to understand who you're catering to and why.
So what would you say then if, let's say we have our market, we've tried to implement tactics, and we're just not successful, right? So how do you deal with that doubt? How do you deal with the failure of maybe knowing that all the time and energy that you've put into it, from your strategy all the way down to your tactics, maybe you've made a mistake? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I would assume the hardest thing for whether it's someone who owns a business is to admit that, hey, this wasn't the right thing to have done.
Egos play a lot in businesses, the owners' egos. We've worked with people who had hired marketing directors. I am a certified marketing manager, so I've talked to some of these owners. And even if they hire somebody to do their marketing, they still tend to want to dictate where that marketing dollar goes or where that tactic is implemented, which is a huge mistake. Sometimes it's not necessarily the tactic. Maybe Facebook is a good place for certain businesses. I know several businesses that do well on that, and that's because they're involved with moms groups and stuff like that, so they have their network of people who come to them. But if, first and foremost, let's talk about the message. Is the message viable for the venue? Like I said, if you're just telling somebody the features of what you sell and not the benefits of it, you're not adding value to what you're trying to sell. It's going in one ear and out the other. I mean, for years, look, we sat in front of televisions and radios, listened to radios for years, and the marketing that goes on there. Well, guess what? Television doesn't have the reach it used to have because we've become immune to it. It used to be you had to touch somebody 6 to 10 times before you can close a deal. That number's gone up to, 20, 25 touches before someone makes a buying decision.
Yeah, think of all the different, especially if you're scrolling on social media, think of all the different messages that you get.
We tend to ignore more than we ever read, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's funny. Speaking of that, are there any things that are really exciting you now when we talk about the marketing world? Are there any big changes? Is there any new practices that really excite you when we talk about taking a business from maybe A to B, or really going through that growth?
I keep tabs on stuff like that because it's my business to do so. But however, excuse me, the weird thing about that is if you were to Google that today, I think what you would find is, I know you would find that the marketing world now has so much more emphasis on quality, value, customer satisfaction, customer journey is now a big buzzword, right? And I totally agree with that. More emphasis on relationship building, right? Customer retention. Well, guess what? Us guys who have been in the marketing business for decades now, this is stuff from the very beginning. This hasn't changed. They just maybe now people have realized, okay, I don't want to be just transactional. I want to have relationships with my customers because, it's 5 times more cost to get a new customer than it is to keep a customer and resell to that same customer. And I think they've realized that, and then now they talk about it publicly. But all this stuff is stuff us in the marketing industry have known for years. Just now it's being verbalized for some reason.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk more about exactly what you just said of building relationships with your customers, specifically to what we're trying to kind of weave in here of your build relationships with your customer avatar, right? Especially when we talk about, you might have a different message or there might be a different tactic for each different avatar. How important in your mind is it to build a specific relationship with your different avatars, right? Because you had mentioned you might have multiple different avatars.
Correct.
So, should you be spending more time in a specific one, or, are you trying to give each different, persona, buyer persona, if you will, customer avatar, the same amount of attention? Kind of talk me through that.
Wow, there's a lot there to unpack. So naturally, if you're getting more business from one particular avatar than another, clearly you want to focus the majority of your business in that particular avatar, right? It's the 80-20 principle. 20% of your efforts give you 80% of your return. But so going back to what you originally said, how important is the relationship with your customers? It's absolutely vital. And it's not because it's not vital just for the transactional side of business. I tell my clients all the time, if you want to know what you could be doing better, or how you can deliver this better, or what you can make better about your product or service, it's very simple. Ask the customer. Okay? So surveys at the end of a job, a service rendered, are very, very important. And I'm not looking for the person who's going to give me 5 stars across the board. I'm looking for the customer who's going to give my client 4 stars or 3 stars. I want to know why.
That honest feedback.
Honest feedback. So anytime you want to make your business service better, whatever it is, you go to the source, the people you're selling to. They'll tell you exactly what they like and don't like. And, is everything, should some things be taken with a grain of salt? Some things should be taken with a block of salt. But clearly, I've never gone wrong when I've directed my clients to say, let's talk to the customer. Let's give them a discount for sitting for 15 minutes with us just to give us the feedback.
And I mean, honestly, if you hear reoccurring messaging through your customers, maybe that's something...
That's a signal, right?
That says, hey, maybe I should actually focus on that, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any sources when we talk, or maybe it's a book, maybe it's a blog, maybe it's, a specific article. Are there any things that, you try to stay current with that, seem to provide great value in the marketing world?
Because I do a lot of different things, from exit strategies to business sales to marketing. I go through a lot of stuff. I have my favorites like Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy to me is a genius in marketing. John Warrillow, of whom does the Value Builder series. Mike Finkel, Simon Sinek is another great person to listen to.
Start with why.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's a big one.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of good information out there, but unfortunately there's also a lot of conflicting information out there. But, business, like politics, is local, right? What happens in your market could be very different. I know when I go to Fort Myers, I'm talking to a different type of business owner than I am in Naples. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any big things going on in your world right now that you want to share?
Oh, there's all kinds of wonderful things going on in my world.
Anything exciting coming up? Or?
Exciting for me personally is next month I actually get to spend about 5 days with Tony Robbins over in West Palm Beach. So in a way that's to me that's almost a dream of mine. It's also very terrifying because, if you know anything about Tony Robbins, he's a no-nonsense, cut-to-the-chase kind of guy, and I'm hoping to learn some really great things from him.
Awesome. Well, let's circle back. What's the one message, what's the one takeaway you want to share with our audience when we talk about marketing strategy versus tactics versus goals versus all of that?
Well, I mean, the takeaway is do your homework. Understand who you're selling to and why. Be a problem solver for your customers. Don't just be the guy who fixes the plumbing. They have a plumbing problem. Be the problem solver for them. If you come across as a problem solver, you can't go wrong. You just can't. But you got to do your homework, understand who you're selling to, understand where the people who might need your services are going to hang out, and understand what they need to hear. Okay, when you understand what they need to hear. I worked with an electrician not too long ago. This is a very short story. And, he was working with general contractors, unfortunately, and he was working with the end user, the homeowner. And we crafted 2 different messages, but we built a website very quickly. It wasn't even a website. It was more like a landing page. And the message there was just exactly what people needed to hear. If you're going to Google to search for an electrician, you got a problem. There's no doubt about it. So he would come up on the searches. We made sure of that. And what they would do, they would go to the page, and there was everything on that page they needed to read to make a buying decision right then and there. And he actually got like an $18,000 job off just somebody Googling him and reading that page and going, yep, this is the guy I need.
Awesome. So then the takeaway is make sure you're communicating the problem that you can solve that your specific customers
Right.
have.
And use their language, not yours.
Awesome.
All right, because we tend to use industry language when we're talking, look, I used to be in the tech business. I owned an IT company for several years. And the one thing I think that made us very successful was I never had any of my techs talk to my customers because they're talking about TCP IP and packets. And, they don't know any of that stuff. They feel intimidated by that stuff. I was the guy who always talked to them because I made it a point to take something very complicated and make it very simple. A lot of times we do the opposite. We're trying to impress people with our knowledge. We take something simple and make it complicated so they feel like they need us. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Take something complicated, make it simple, give them the information. People want to buy, right?
Well, they're looking, that's for sure.
They want to buy. They just maybe don't want to be sold in a certain fashion.
Yeah.
Right? So tell them what they need. Let them trust you. Let them like you. Let them know you. And they're going to buy.
Awesome. Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much, Sergio. If our viewers had any more questions on any of the stuff that we talked about today, how can they best get in touch with you?
Well, I'm found very easily on the internet. So the website is maxbusinessprofits.com, smallbusinessadvising.com. You can call me direct at 239-580-7408. I answer all my calls quickly. And look, if you just want to spitball with me for a little bit, I do it all the time. I love to do it.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, make sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss another show. Join other professionals looking to grow their business with Southwest Florida Inc. at SWFLInc.com and sign up for a free membership today. Thanks so much for listening to Business Builders. We'll see you next time.